Hey, everybody, welcome back to the I Believe podcast. Today I am joined with a fellow patient, Carol McColl, and she is someone that we've had on the Eye on Mental Health series multiple times. And we're having her on as a guest today again, just because we are going to talk about collective grief and collective hope. And the ways that we've seen this show up in the ocular melanoma community. We've connected on social media and just through, the last, 6 months or so, there've just been kind of a lot of different things happening. And I always appreciate Carol's insights and the things that she shares on my personal posts and the things that I see her commenting toward other patients. Carol, let's just dive right into this. What does collective grief mean to you, and how have you seen that show up in the ocular melanoma community? And I know that we mentioned we want to cover grief and hope kind of in the same space.
Well, I will say personally, in my own life, I have had a pile of grief in my adult life, but I've also found a wellspring of hope. And much of that is tied to the community that's been around me at the time that I've gone through those seasons. But true confession, these terms collective grief and collective hope, I did Google them, so I was getting it right. And so I will just share what I found to be the quote unquote definition of collective grief. It is any time a group or community experiences an extreme change or loss, shared grief, shared emotions. And we experience this many ways in our culture. We see this, we saw it on a national level with 9/11. It didn't matter what party you belonged to, everybody was grieving that event. And we see it with school shootings. We saw it this summer with the flooding in Texas. I'm a Texan, it was huge here. Sometimes it's the loss of a beloved family member. But on the OM pages, we also experience collective grief. We experience it when someone is newly diagnosed. We always hear, "Oh, I'm so sorry you have reason to be here." We experience it when we find out someone has METs. We all just groan inside. We experience when a trial stops working and someone has to switch, or maybe there's nothing left, or there's disease progression. We definitely experience it when someone dies. I remember when Clay died a few years ago, and we're all just like, and we feel that deeply because we all know and share the same fears and anxieties and concerns, and we feel a loss for each OMI that goes through that, whether we know them personally or not. There is a true sense of loss for community, and there's also awareness that could be me, and that hits hard. And so we move towards each other in collective grief to offer comfort and encouragement and support. So that's the collective grief side. Shall I go on with collective hope?
Absolutely. I absolutely love what you said, so thank you.
Okay, so with collective hope, which I also Googled, there's three components, which I will also read to you actually. Collective hope is the shared belief within a group that a better future is possible. That's what we all want. That's what we all hope for. We are innately wired for survival, right? And so we cheer each other on with every successful scan, with every good trial result for any one of us. The second component is that the group has the power to achieve it through cooperation and solidarity. Now, we see this in nonprofits like A Cure in Sight and their catchphrase, "I believe in a cure." We see them going to DC to educate people about on Rare Disease Day and to raise awareness with representatives. We see this with A Cure in Sight funding research and supporting patients. The third component is collective hope goes beyond individual optimism by focusing on a common vision and the collective will to navigate challenges and work toward shared goals. I just love that. And we see that fostered by nonprofits. We see, for instance, with Eye on Grace, one of their bylines is fueling hope, right? We see it with A Cure in Sight when they are doing fundraisers like the 5Ks or golf tournaments for OM and this patient symposium, which is huge in fueling hope. So there's this collective vision and collective will in the ocular melanoma community. And we think about, I did this initially thinking of us as patients, but we have to remember all the doctors and researchers, they share that with us. And they are at the front lines fighting for that. And so we get to cheer them on also and be grateful for them. As a community, we experience collective hope when there are these new advances or new things approved by the FDA, new trials, new treatments, new approaches. And it truly is a one for all and all for one mentality. There are some people who participate in trials knowing that even if the trial doesn't work for them, their participation can benefit others down the road, or they get on board with different studies, because it's not just about me or about you, it's about the whole community. This is what it means to be a community, to be pulling for one another and contributing to that collective hope.
Oh my goodness. This is like, I mean, I think this hits the nail on the head for so many parts of the things that we hear and see in, especially like on social media groups. And I know that when we talked before, that was kind of one of the things that we talked a little about, is how when the collective grief happens, there's kind of a shift where a lot of patients kind of, I don't want to say like fall into, well, maybe that's a good phrase. They kind of fall into fear because of that. Like, oh man, this is so triggering. This could happen to me. And I've felt that. Like from the moment that I had a friend of mine who was, one of the first people I connected with ocular melanoma. Her name is Lexi, and she unfortunately passed away. But when she was diagnosed with metastatic disease in the December of 2021, I was devastated. I mean, I was devastated. And it wasn't just devastated for her, it was devastated because it was like, it was hard to kind of wrap my head around the idea that I could still have hope for people like me, people like her, because like it's one of those freak things where, this was never supposed to happen to somebody like me or somebody like her in the first place. Statistically, we shouldn't exist in the ocular melanoma community as young people with OM, but we do. And so then when we deal with metastatic disease, it feels like infinitely harder in that realm. And I think that that's the case really for anybody dealing with meds. But seeing someone you love, someone you know, experience the just the devastation that getting a new wave to that diagnosis. I love what Clay used to say all the time. He would talk about like this diagnosis comes in waves, right? We experience things in waves in OM, and it there's highs and lows for sure. But I think that maybe the biggest thing that I pulled out of what you said earlier was that we are innately wired for survival, and that is why leaning into that collective shared hope is so helpful. Because I think what we notice is we notice people experience the grief, right? The loss of someone like Clay or someone like Lexi or someone like my friend Allie. We see the loss happen, and then we pull out, right? We pull away from the community because we're triggered and we're devastated. We're gonna have grief because that's gonna happen in a cancer community, but we also need hope. Like we are wired for survival. We're wired to hope, and to have kind of this faith despite the unknown. So why is it important to hold space for both and to not just kind of like put your head in the sand and completely avoid community altogether, as opposed to experiencing the highs and the lows as a group?
Yeah, and let me just tap into something you just said. I think there is value at different points. Sometimes we know that emotionally we cannot hear any more sadness. Like we've just hit our tipping point, and not just because of the
Absolutely.
community, but maybe other things happening in our lives, and we just need to step back. And I just want to make sure that people recognize that we honor that. There is a space that we might need to step back and breathe, let some of the emotional dust settle before we step back in. But stepping back in, as you say, is part of also moving towards community and embracing hope again. And for me, like one of my purposes on the pages is just to encourage people. I don't have Mets. I hope to God I don't get Mets, but I could. But right now I'm in a season where I can step in and encourage people. And so just because I'm not going through what somebody else is going through, it doesn't mean I don't have something to give, because everybody needs encouragement. The word I once had a friend who told me that the word encouragement means to fill with courage, encourage, to fill with courage. And we do that in
Oh, I love
community.
that.
I love it too. So I'll probably end up saying that again during this time. But so in the community, yes, as you say, we do experience loss and grief on so many levels, even at the time of diagnosis, maybe even most traumatically, at least for those of us who don't yet have met, it's most traumatic at the time of diagnosis. There's the loss of health. There's the loss of the future we envision. For some, it's the physical loss of their eye. For many, there's the loss of feeling understood, even by their family and their closest friends, because they don't get what it is to have anxiety or to deal with that waiting for the other shoe to drop kind of feeling. Some have lost their life partners because that life partner didn't want to deal with the reality of cancer. And so then they are truly walking it alone in a way they never imagined they would have to. But for every one of us, there's the reality of facing our mortality in a new way. When you're older like me, I'm turning 68, you're kind of thinking about that anyway. But when you're younger in the prime of life, that's kind of not at the forefront of your mind. But for all of us, no matter what the age is, it's facing that mortality. And that creates a paradigm shift because we start to look at life through a new and different lens. And we see life more clearly than we did before. And we prioritize what matters. There are so many OM patients who have said, even though I have OM and I can't see out of that eye, I see life more clearly. And I love that kind of juxtaposition there. In the midst of that grief, we find we're grabbing on to hope because we talk about living fully now. We create memories now with loved ones. We tackle that bucket list now. And we want to make each day count. And we want to live in gratitude for the life we do have now. You've often said, the days add up. Today, I'm here today, and the days add up, right? And so we're essentially creating our desired future now instead of waiting around for someday. I think that's very life giving to all of us, and we cheer each other on in that. These are really deliberate, positive choices. They're hope filled choices, and those choices create meaning at a place of great difficulty. And here's something that I will probably repeat again also, but I'm going to repeat it twice right now. Meaning fuels hope, hope fuels strength and courage, and that fuels resilience and perseverance. I know resilience is a big word for you, but we have to remember this. Meaning fuels hope. What are you living for? What's your purpose? Hope fuels strength and courage, and that fuels resilience and perseverance. And we need all of those things. And I will say that, I mean, that's something that I just kind of wrote, but I will say that research supports this. Research says that more hopeful people are healthier as well as less anxious and depressed. Moreover, instead of being wishful thinking, hope prepares us to take productive action steps. And those who are more hopeful tend to cope with adversity in more resilient and adaptive ways. So we have to, we inevitably experience the grief, but we have got to find a way to grab onto that hope also. And we often say in the OM community, everything is welcome here. So we empathize and grieve with each other in the losses, but we also cheer each other on in the successes. I think of OM as a marathon. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We are each running our own race in that marathon, and we each have our own particular challenges in that race. But side by side, we're running it together. And so we support each other, holding on to that hope, chasing joy, and embracing life in new and better ways. So,
Yeah. No, I think that's beautiful. And I absolutely love what you said earlier about that when we have meaning, like the meaning, it's meaning making. That's one of the most challenging things to do, I think, in a cancer diagnosis is making meaning of this. Because I think the immediate answer when you get diagnosed, wherever you're at in the journey, is why did this happen, right? You want to look for that kind of meaning. And sometimes more often than not, I think with this diagnosis, there isn't a reason, right? It just happened. And it's really, really crappy that it happened to any of us. But that meaning that we can make out of this, right? Like the idea that, I kind of latched onto that, okay, well, this happened to me. I can't change the circumstance, but maybe what I can share, on social media and the way that I can serve the wider OM community through podcasting, through social media, through just sharing my personal story, maybe that can help one other person. Or like I've heard so many people say, I'm posting about my diagnosis because I have hope that maybe you're going to see this and it's just going to encourage one person to go to the eye doctor and that they're going to find an ocular melanoma way sooner than they did and that they'll be in a better spot because of earlier detection. Those kinds of things, right? That's meaning making. It doesn't have to just be accepting your diagnosis, but I do think that when we make meaning or we have purpose and meaning not just of our diagnosis but in life in general, then it's so much easier to feel hope and to then feel the courage and the strength to then be resilient and have perseverance in the face of all of the big curveballs that come your way with an OM diagnosis. Because it's not just the one diagnosis part. Like there's a lot. We have to deal with a lot.
Castle Biosciences is a proud sponsor of this I Believe podcast. Castle's innovative uveal melanoma tests provide valuable information about the risk of your eye cancer spreading to help you and your healthcare team individualize the management of your disease. To learn more, visit castlebiosciences.com.
It's a challenge. It's
yeah,
absolutely a challenge to deal with.
I'll put in a plug here for a book that I honestly have not read the whole book. I've read excerpts of it, but it's so many people have read it that tell me how wonderful it was. And it's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he had been in a concentration camp. It was finding meaning even in that circumstance that gave him hope and gave him that resilience that he needed. So this is not just fluffy talk about something fluffy called hope. This is real stuff.
And with loss, it can be so hard to find that meaning. Just on a personal level, I feel like it's been a huge privilege to be able to witness the way that you and your family have grieved, because I know that you guys lost your 11-year-old granddaughter to brain cancer. So do you want to talk a little about how like grief and hope have been able to coexist for you guys in that personal circumstance?
Sure. I will say, it was a mix of grief and hope for the 19 months after her brain tumor was discovered. She had glioblastoma and she was 9. And if I tear up, it's because it's, 3.5 years ago and it's still fresh. And it will always be fresh in my heart, I think. But, we learn to just accept both along the way because both were needed. And for her family, for us, we had our religious moorings and our Christian faith that definitely were anchoring for us. And yet I also know that, many of us in the family would just cry out to God like, "Oh, please don't let this happen." You're just like dreading that outcome, which, glioblastoma does not have a good outcome. There is no cure. So, but I will say that Gwyn, her name was Gwyn, and she herself was a beautiful example of grief and hope. She wrote a story the summer before she was diagnosed with cancer. She was 9. And eventually, as her tumor came back again after a year, she was diagnosed in November at Thanksgiving. Then the following Thanksgiving, it came back. And she had to make a wish. And her make a wish was to become a published author. And she wanted to publish a story that she had written before she was actually diagnosed. And she called it Drippy, the Story of the Sad Rain Cloud. And her purpose in writing it, and again, this gave her meaning, her purpose in writing it was she wanted people to know that they can hold grief and joy at the same time. Now, this isn't something she came up with on her own. This is something that had been talked about in her family long before her diagnosis. But these were just basic psychological principles that this 9-year-old had grasped and wanted to share. It's a children's book, and so a lot of people buy it for other children with cancer. But it's also a book. I have clients in my counseling practice who have bought it. It's an uplifting book, and it helps give some perspective. There's a psychological principle underneath it. When we repress one emotion, tamping it down, we actually tamp down all of our emotions. We think, "Oh, I'm just going to push this down." Oh no, we push it all down, and then we wonder why we're, not feeling so much joy anymore and so much happiness or whatever. So if we try to suppress or avoid fear or loss, we're also going to feel less peace and less joy. So we've got to remember that grief and hope must coexist. It's been said, when we stop hoping, we begin to die. And so we need to hope in this life. And for me, in my own belief system, there's also a hope for the life to come. So my hope is really critically important to my own journey in life, not just with OM, but with so many other things that are part of my story. So, but I will say hope is a tricky word. It can sound really fluffy. It can sound like Pollyanna positivity. Oh, things will be better tomorrow. And that's not actually true
Yeah.
hope. That's,
Or like just have hope, it's going to be okay. Like,
yeah, hold on to hope.
but
What is that?
it's one of those words that I think has it has such deep meaning, but because it's so overused in difficult situations, it can start to kind of lose its effectiveness, or you start to feel the false positivity, or not the false positivity, the toxic positivity.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
I call it Pollyanna positivity. Oh,
I
things
like
will be
that.
better tomorrow. And hope is not pretending that things are better than they are. And it's not ignoring difficulties. That's magical thinking, which is really very unhealthy, actually. But I think that hope is seeing those difficulties for what they are, recognizing there's something to be good to be found in the midst of them, and then choosing to believe there is a future to look forward to in spite of them. That future might just be tomorrow, and that's okay. Tomorrow is my future, right? And I'm feeling given today, and I do hope for tomorrow, right? So,
Yeah. sometimes that's all I can do. Like that's
Exactly.
why the mantra, like, I'm here today, I'll be here tomorrow, the tomorrow's add up. Like that's why I landed on it. It was because the most I could hope for in that moment for how much like devastation and grief I was feeling was the next day.
And there's truth in that because today is all we have been given. None of us knows. I mean, I could get taken out by a truck this afternoon when I'm doing my errands. Who knows? We have today. So we make today count. We make it matter. We do well, we love well, we give well, and then tomorrow we wake up and we do the same thing. Um, but I will say, I think of hope like individual hope is like holding a candle. But there are times that candle is flickering, a bad result to a scan, or, just bad news in general, bad circumstances in life. And that candle can start flickering. We certainly went through that with our granddaughter. Um, but when there's more candles that enter the room, we can borrow from their light. And then that light helps us find handles in that dark place. And that helps us keep going. That is the gift and the blessing of collective hope.
I feel like one of the things that we talked about is a parallel to the Drippy, the Sad Rain Cloud book that your granddaughter Gwen wrote, which I have, by the way, and I highly recommend it. I think it's a really good book. It's been really great for me to have for my kids and just to like kind of bring out here and there to just remind them that the goal is not only to feel good, right? It's not only to feel like, oh, I'm only happy, I'm only joyful, I'm only hopeful. The goal is to learn how to process the feelings, right? And that all of the feelings have space. And I actually, like, I think it was, I don't remember who it was that I heard from, but I actually started kind of veering away from calling, difficult emotions even like bad feelings, right? It's not a bad feeling, it's a feeling. There is no good or bad to it. They can be difficult to feel or difficult to experience. I love the scene from the Inside Out movie where at the very end, if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen the movie Inside Out, I'm sorry, spoilers for the movie. It's such a good movie. It's got such good meaning for, I think, adults and for kids alike. But they essentially learn that they need sadness, right? Joy spends this whole time in the whole movie trying to get rid of sadness and like just telling her like, no, 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 sadness, like you're wrecking everything, you're ruining everything. And sadness eventually is the one that they realize they need sadness, that joy doesn't actually exist alone. Joy exists in some ways because of sadness. And it's because of the sadness that is felt when you're grieving something, right? In this case, it's Riley grieving the loss of a game. She lost a game. She like didn't make a good shot, or something happened in that game that was disappointing, devastating. And so there was some level of sadness and grief and an upset, but her community came around her, and it was the community coming around her that brought the joy back to life. You said something else about the movie, about how it wasn't just realizing that you needed the joy and the sadness, it was also that sadness, what did sadness do?
Sadness led the way home. Joy kept trying
Oh
to
yeah.
drag sadness back,
Yes,
and
yes,
it
yes.
wasn't working.
And she's like, no, 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 we go this way. And sadness is like, no, actually, it's
Yeah.
this way.
Sadness led the way home, and actually, anger was that burst through at the end. And there's a place for healthy anger. And so we need to. I remember early in the movie, Joy draws a circle on the floor and says to Sadness, "Now you stay here. Don't cross that line. You're going to wreck everything." And we do that with ourselves. We compartmentalize and say, "Oh, just have to stay positive." And I'm a big believer that there's value in being positive. We get to choose that. And that does not mean it's not that toxic positivity. It is honest. You can see our glass is half full or half empty, and it's actually both, isn't it? Really.
To the point of that movie and what Riley experienced, in the moment that she was really sad, her team rallied around her. And so that I feel like is a beautiful demonstration of this idea of community. So, what does the role of community play in helping people like us with an OM diagnosis process grief and transform it into connection or meaning?
Well, as you've already said, life is full of highs and lows, and we certainly have the highs and lows within this ocular melanoma community. But we were never meant to carry those things alone. There's a psychologist, his name's Kurt Thompson. I love his books. And he says we were made for relationship and wired for connection. Our first community is actually in the family system. And we see this from the time a baby is born, the importance of bonding and emotional attachment, and how that leads to emotional health and thriving. And when a baby doesn't have that, there's failure to thrive. And that affects the baby in body, soul, and spirit, physical health, emotional health, the whole gamut. But that's not limited to infancy. That's just a clue of how we are wired as human beings. That's how we are created to be. We thrive in loving, supportive relationships from the day we are born. When we isolate, we tend to see our emotional health suffer. Some people are more prone to depression or hopelessness or even physical sickness. And we have to remember that there's a book also called The Body Keeps the Score. And it just talks about how emotional health impacts physical health. And we all want to protect our physical health, right? Like we're all doing the things we can to be as healthy as we can be, just hoping that will help our bodies along, right? So Kurt Thompson says that we all need relationships where we feel seen, soothed, safe, and secure. I love those 4 words, and I love the way he strings them together. For many people, after diagnosis and treatment, including myself, there's a sense of loneliness and isolation because we're dealing with this rare and terrible cancer nobody's heard of, no one understands it. In my own story, I went through a very rough season of grief during the 4 months after diagnosis. It was grief and depression. I was diagnosed in July. My daughter got married 2 weeks later, and then I got treatment 6 days later, and then I just took a nosedive. And I went to my very first A Cure in Sight patient symposium that November, right after Thanksgiving. And I was in a really dark place, a very dark place. I was new, nobody knew me. I had a lot going on inside me that was related to diagnosis and to other factors in my life. But even though I was fairly reserved, I witnessed the OM community around me. Some were in their own dark places, others were thriving. But being among that community, you know this because you go there all the time, right? Being among that community was both comforting and encouraging. And the community helped me draw me towards hope. It was like this tectonic shift internally for me and the beginning of coming out of my post diagnosis depression that was there that I also learned about the OM pages that I didn't even know exist. And oh my gosh, I wish I had not gone through those first 4 months without those pages. I might not have cratered the way I did. So for me and so many others in the OM community, being with other OMIs, whether it's on the pages or in person, becomes a healing space where we feel seen, soothed, safe, and secure because all the emotions are welcome. In our culture, grief is not always a welcome emotion. People don't really know what to do with it. There can be an avoidance. People avoid nursing homes. They avoid talking about the loved one that died. Oh, don't bring her up. They'll be sad. And it's like, no, we want to talk about Gwen. Putting people on a timeline. We expect them to move on, get over it, kind of a thing. It's time to move forward. And all of that is just because we are uncomfortable with grief. We are uncomfortable with that person's grief. But here's the thing, we can push grief away like a petulant child, but our emotions insist on being heard. Grief will be heard. Sometimes it'll come out in depression. Often it comes out sideways in anger. We can have a whole mix of ways that it shows up. But when we welcome all the emotions in ourselves and in others, we can't really welcome them in others if we're not welcoming them in ourselves. But when we welcome them all and let them have an expression, a healthy expression, not a destructive one, we become more fully human. That is part of being fully alive. A baby coming out of the womb doesn't have any checks on their emotions. They just let you know what they're feeling, right? That baby is fully alive. And we learn in our culture and in life to just like tamp it down and, keep a lid on it. But part of being fully alive is being connected to our emotions, and they deserve a place at the table. They deserve to be seen, to have a voice. When you were talking about the movie Inside Out, I was just visualizing all these emotions sitting around a boardroom table. And we don't want the emotions driving the train. We don't want them like in charge, but we have to listen to what they tell us because they're telling us what we need. If I'm sad, I need comfort. If I'm anxious, I need reassurance or peace. If I'm depressed, I need hope. So if we can't label that thing we're feeling, then we also don't really know what we need. And with my clients, this is the first thing I always ask them, what are you feeling today? Because that feeling will tell me and tell them what they need. And then we can do the things we need to do to get that need met, not just passively sitting around hoping that need somehow gets understood by somebody. We can be proactive. and get that need met for ourselves.
You're bringing up something that I actually talked about with my psychologist recently, and I was experiencing a lot of anxiety. And he actually framed anxiety in a completely different way for me. He doesn't call anxiety a feeling. In his mind, he looks at anxiety as a response, that it is a response to unaddressed fear or to unaddressed anger or whatever other kind of main underlying emotion is there. That anxiety that we sometimes feel, that we the way we feel those feelings in our body, that anxiety is a response. It's a physiological response that is gonna happen if I don't address the core emotions, if I don't give them a seat at the table, like you were saying. And so when I choose to then learn how to give them the seat at the table and to listen and to pay attention, hold space for those feelings, and to just not make them wrong for showing up, because they're going to show up. They show up a lot in a cancer diagnosis. Like, I don't know about you guys listening, but I feel like sadness and grief and anger and fear, like, they all show up a lot throughout cancer. And I'm 5+ years into my diagnosis. Carol, I don't know how many years you're into OM, but
7.
7. Yeah, like it doesn't stop. Like, you're going to keep feeling these feelings in waves and in different things. So better learn now how to allow them the seat at the table and learn how to respond to them so that you're not just having an automatic reaction, I think.
Yes, and as we learn how to respond to them, it gives us much more capacity for empathy for other people going through those. We don't shut other people down. We say, we get it. Your feelings are welcome. And so going back to collective grief and collective hope, I've got this little mathematical equation that I like, that when highs and lows are shared collectively, grief is divided and hope is multiplied. And that, as I said before, hope results in resilience, encouragement, filling with courage, comfort, and joy. I love that mathematical equation. And I think that it's a really important one to grab onto is in the collective community. This is why we need to be connected to other people. Some people, I'm an introvert. Like, it's weird that I'm doing this, but I'm an introvert. So I don't need lots of people in my life. I need that handful of close people. And there's a handful of Omis that I've become very close to. And we have a private thread that we are always on with each other. 2 of them have Mets. 2 have lost an eye. But we cheer each other on and we pray for each other and we cry with each other and all of the things, right? We need that collective grief and collective hope.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Aura Biosciences is a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on developing precision therapies for solid tumors that aim to preserve organ function. Our lead candidate, Belsar, is currently in late-stage development for primary choroidal melanoma and in early-stage development in other ocular oncology indications and bladder cancer. Our mission is to grow as an innovative global oncology company that positively transforms the lives of patients. For more information, please visit us at aurabiosciences.com.
Okay, so kind of moving forward, how do like cultural differences, spiritual perspectives and differences, how can those shape the ways that we can grieve in our community, in our personal lives, and also find the meaning that brings hope?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I think that we have to remember that grief is even when we grieve in community, it's a very personal journey and we're going to go about it differently. And we need to honor that. And it's not something we can do for one another. But I will say collective grief and collective hope, these are like modern labels for ancient practices. Collective grief, particularly in our Western culture, we're very individual to the point of kind of an unhealthy independence and isolation. But other cultures, community is central, and there's a healthy interdependence that's fostered. We shy away from dependence, so we lean towards independence, but there's this sweet spot in the middle where there's this interdependence. I want to clarify grief is an emotion, mourning is the external expression of grief. So there's rituals in different cultures and faith systems where that is the grief is expressed. You can learn a lot from healthy ways that other cultures or faith systems practice this. But the one that most often stands out to me is in Judaism. They sit Shiva for 7 days of mourning in the period right after a family member is buried. And this allows them, all the family members are together, and this allows them to begin the healing process together. They stay home and the community gathers around them and does the food and does, all the caring things. My friend Deb McAdams, who's an OMI, we were talking about this last week. She says, yeah, you're kind of stuck with them, even if you don't want it, you're stuck with them. But there's a healthiness in that, kind of that blanket wrapping around you of support. And then in Judaism, even after that 7 days, there's a year of practices that are part of their mourning. So it's an unhurried grief, and we need to honor that. Like, just because somebody got bad news 6 months ago does not mean they're over it. They are in the thick of it, and they might be revisiting that bad news every day, particularly if it's like Mets. They're just, every day they're facing the effects of the trial they're on or something like that. In the Hispanic cultures, memorials are built. In Indian and Middle Eastern cultures, I see this on TV. They're in these mourning clothes and there's wailing in the streets. This is a mourning practice. It's not a go hide behind a wall and grieve alone. It's a very public thing. And it's foreign to us, at least it's foreign to me in my background, but there's a sense that the whole community is joined together there. In our culture, we have celebration of life services. So when Gwen died, she died on a Sunday and she was buried 2 days later. They live in the country and they have a family plot at the back of their farm. They created Gwen's garden. And so she was buried there at the family plot. And there was just maybe like 50 of us gathered. But 6 weeks later, about was when they did a celebration of life service. And then all the communities came, the church community and the homeschool community and, people from their workplaces and people they knew through sports and all these things. The whole community gathered, and it's a time to memorialize that person and to share stories. And, just there, even in the sharing of memories, there's comfort in the sharing of stories. There's joy and laughter. So, and then even after that, 6 months later, in November, in the Anglican tradition, there's what's called All Saints' Day. A lot of liturgical traditions have that. And they honored Gwen then by inviting her homeschool community come and plant daffodil bulbs all around the outside, the perimeter of Gwen's garden. And those come up every year in the spring. And it was something tangible for those children to do as a community. They loved Gwen. She was an important part of their community. And it was a way they could do something tangible to express their loss. But all these practices, regardless of the culture or faith system, they all reflect this a principle in Christian teaching, which is bear one another's burdens in the New Testament. And the Greek word for burden there talks about a weight that is too heavy, too extreme to carry alone. It's not, go make your kids bed for them. No, they can do that. That's not a burden. That's just their job. But burdens are things that are just too heavy to carry alone. And in all of these practices, we see that presence is a gift. The shared emotions help shoulder the pain, and we infuse one another with support and comfort and encouragement.
Carol, thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing to just have this conversation, and I think to just shed some light on what on the one hand can sometimes feel, like that collective grief, the triggers that come up when we see a loss in our community of somebody who had ocular melanoma and passed away. When we feel that kind of triggering feeling come back up, I think I hope that this is helpful to those of you guys listening in helping you recognize that, okay, yes, we can't avoid feeling that is going to come up, especially if you're a member of the community and you are involved in a way that you find that community. But I hope that what we can demonstrate here is that the net positive, I guess, and the net help that comes from also having the community to carry hope and to create hope is so worth it. It's so worth the vulnerability of connecting with each other. So what is a message of hope or reflection that you really hope our listeners would carry forward?
It's not lost on me that Grief Awareness Day is in December. The holidays can be very, very hard days. My highest client load is between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's an emotionally laden season for lots of reasons. There's that traditional Christmas carol, and the chorus says, "Tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy." Those two things are psychological needs and they're also spiritual needs. It's hard for people to relate to all the holiday cheer and the, ringing bells and all that kind of stuff when inside they're just cratering and they're aching because they've had a difficult year or a variety of losses. And these difficulties create psychological hurdles, and many wrestle with spiritual questions in that season also. And we have to remember the APA honors that we are spiritual beings. I was glad that the APA finally acknowledged that. And we have to honor that piece of ourselves also. When we can honor and accept one another at those points of need, then we contribute to each other's healing. As far as a message of hope or reflection, I guess I would say two things. First of all, grieve well. Give yourself permission to grieve. It's okay to grieve. It doesn't mean you're not thankful for things at Thanksgiving, and it doesn't mean that you're not interested in Christmas necessarily. It just means that you're dealing with really hard things, and honor those feelings and grieve well in community. At our church, we actually have a service once a year. It'll be next weekend, called Comfort and Joy, and it is for people who have gone through very difficult years, and that they want to create a space where that is honored, and they recognize that all this, rah rah about Christmas might not be jiving, all this Christmas joy might not be what somebody's experiencing. And so it's a place to honor that and let them people express that. Secondly, I have to add that hope isn't only as sure as the object of our hope. If the object of my hope is this brass lamp sitting on my desk, I am in dire straits because that brass lamp isn't going to help me at all. So we need to pay attention to where our hope is. In the OM community, I think most, if not all of us, have a lot of hope in science because there are tremendous advances being made by researchers. When I was diagnosed, my doctor said, if you have to have OM, this is the best time to have it because there's so much happening. And that was 7 years ago. There is so much that has happened in the last 7 years. And so, that's a great thing. And it's okay to hope for those outcomes. We're cheering those researchers on, right? And we can't be thankful enough. And honestly, practicing gratitude for that is also part of the pathway to back to hope and joy. But I also know that science is limited. Science is not going to show up and offer me comfort or help or strength on my difficult days. It gives me something in my cognitive brain, but my emotional brain needs something different. For me, as a Christian, my ultimate hope is rooted in the bedrock of my Christian faith. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. I'm fairly open about that on the pages. I don't get super preachy, but it's there. It's not lost on me that Grief Awareness Day is in December, which is the season of Advent in the Christian calendar. And Advent celebrates the coming of Christ, who was the light of the world. But Fleming Rutledge, who's an author, she wrote a big fat book on Advent. She says, Advent begins in the dark. Just let that sink in. Advent begins in the dark when everything seems hopeless. That's why in the Christian tradition, we're looking for that light because everything seems hopeless apart from it. In my belief system, in my relationship with God, He's not left us helpless or hopeless. He's a rescuing, redeeming God. And He draws near to the brokenhearted. He stoops low to listen to our cries. He has compassion on us as a loving Father has compassion on His children. One of the best known Psalms that crosses a lot of belief systems is Psalm 23. It's read at a lot of memorial services. But He's a good shepherd in that psalm, and He walks with us in the valley of the shadow of death. And I'm telling you, when we're diagnosed, we've just stepped into the valley of the shadow of death, right? We might not have meds yet, but we've stepped there. And to know that He is a good shepherd who not just walks there with us, but He scoops us up and puts us on His shoulders and carries us in those really hard places that are scary and treacherous and lonely. That is good news. That is really good news. So for me, that hope steadies me. It isn't an unreliable outcome related to OM. It's really in the person of Jesus Christ who brings light to my dark places. It's so anchoring to know that God meets us at our point of need. He strengthens us, encourages us. Sometimes it's through another person. Sometimes it's through a community. Sometimes it's through someone we don't even know. But He comes to us with this accepting love, and then we get to share that with one another. And that goes back to the collective grief and the collective hope. These things are about living in community and expressing that kind of loving acceptance to one another, wherever we're at, whatever our point of need is. Also, there's that Christian principle of, I think it says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. That's what collective hope is and collective grief is. And that compassion and comfort that we offer other people also strengthens and heals all of us and contributes to that courage and resilience that we all need. So those are my parting thoughts.
Oh, I love it. Carol, thank you so, so much for taking the time out of your day, practicing with clients and with the time with your family to be vulnerable and honor us with not only your personal story, but just with all of these insights that you have about this idea of collective hope and collective grief and how important it is to hold space for both of them. I truly hope that this episode and the message that Carol had to share with us is something that impacts you. And if it is something that impacts you and you're listening today, please make sure to share this. I mean, I absolutely love and adore that you shared the impact that your faith, like your religious faith and your spirituality has on your journey with ocular melanoma. I think that is a beautiful thing to share. And if you don't have and hold the same beliefs as Carol, I know like I don't, but I don't find it any less helpful or comforting to listen to somebody else kind of express the ways that they find meaning and make meaning. But if you're listening and you've found some purpose in this and you've found some extra layers of meaning that have just maybe helped you see things in a new way or just helped you kind of pick yourself up on a dark day, please share this with somebody else. Tag them in the comments. I would love if you guys just flood the comments with some quotes that give you hope. It can be quotes from the scriptures. It could be quotes from, from authors that you find helpful. It could be your own made up quote. I make up my own quotes all the time. It's great.
I do too, actually.
But you guys, like it is, let's have some space, right? Let's hold some space for each other collectively. And let's just light up the comments with a little bit of extra hope this season.
I am so grateful you invited me to do this. I just felt so honored that day you reached out to me. So thank you for the opportunity. And if anybody just has anything, they want to comment to me directly about something, they're welcome to reach out to me in a private message on Facebook. So I'd welcome any of it. So thank you.
Well, what we'll do in the description as well is we will link as many of the book references as we can come up with from some of the books that you mentioned. And we'll also link a link to Carol's Facebook page if you want to friend her. And just send a huge shout out to our sponsors as well who make having these kinds of conversations possible. We have multiple sponsors who support the I Believe podcast now and our YouTube channel. And so just a huge thanks for Castle Biosciences, Immunocore, Delcath, and Aura for just holding space for us as patients to have these conversations and to empower each other and educate each other, not just about medical stuff, but about kind of the emotional journey of navigating ocular melanoma. So we look forward to seeing you guys next time and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.